Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Yeah, Pokemon, yeah! It is the 20th anniversary of when Pokemon Red and Green premiered in Japan in all their glitchy, misshapen sprite glory. 20 years since an electric rodent became the mascot of a generation and had a sword put through its plushie by really stupid ministers. 20 years of creepypastas about cursed cartridges and being buried alive. 20 years of questioning the age of an anime protagonist because the show has so many episodes that if each episode accounted for a single day, he should be like 3 years older by now. It's admittedly a bit overwhelming to think that Pokemon is 20 years old now, especially since so many of us played it as little kids. It makes us feel that we ourselves have lost our childhood, that we got old. But the truth is, we didn't get old. We became masters. To commemorate this occasion, I was hoping to find the very first Pokemon manga ever made, or at least one of the first. The earliest are apparently some 4-panel gag strips, but in terms of an ongoing story, it's a series called Pocket Monsters, or Pokemon Pocket Monsters. There seems to be some debate about the translations of it. A lot of sites say it was never made into English, yet still other sites say it was released in English in Singapore. Regardless, I was unable to find scans of it in English though, so we're out of luck there. Pocket Monsters was an odd beast already. It was apparently a bit of absurdist humor mixed with the overall adventure, with the main character Red traveling around with a talking Clefairy named Pippi. Pippi was apparently known as being crass and vulgar, which brings about the wonderful mental image of this thing flipping people off and swearing. Like I said, I couldn't find scans of it, but a fan pointed me in the direction of another bizarre oddity of Pokemon comics. A daily newspaper strip that ran for just over a year from 2000 to 2001. It was written by Gerard Jones and drawn by Ashura Benimaru as a gag-a-day kind of thing, following somewhat more domestic adventures of Ash Ketchum and his Pokemon. He lived with his mom alongside his team and got into mischief and sometimes hung out with Brock and Misty, who had a somewhat more open crush on him than was seen in the show. I was tempted to make this the subject of the review, but honestly, as we saw with the My Cage review, comic strips are very much a different beast than comic books. There's not really much in terms of an ongoing narrative, is what I'm saying. And I prefer reviewing something with an actual story to it. I could have done the next issue of The Electric Tale of Pikachu, like I had planned to do until the Patreon request for Rebirth, but it feels odd doing a sequel episode for the anniversary. What's more, I couldn't even find a comic that was a straight-up parody of Pokemon. Not like a one-time gag or something, but a straight-up, like, I don't know, parody-mon or something. Even Power Rangers has had some of those. Why the hell didn't Pokemon have any? So while I did hope to find something Pokemon-related that'd be truly awful, well, might as well celebrate something good. As such, let's dig into the first 2 chapters of Pokémon Adventures.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man punch, wears a party hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazons and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test. To train.
Pokémon Adventures is probably the most popular and enduring Pokémon manga out there. While the storyline and main characters change with each generation, you can't help but appreciate how it goes about creating storylines that are often better than what the games sometimes have to offer. It helps that elements that are sometimes superfluous or forgotten in the games are expanded more and given deeper lore. We're focusing on the first 2 chapters here because, well, it gives us a little more to snark about, even if this is really good. We open in a place called Pallet Town, where there are much looser laws concerning animal experimentation. Some kids are trying to capture a Nidorino, which is kind of this poisonous rabbit thing, except like 3 feet tall, but are having difficulty. I'm gonna catch this Pokemon and make it my personal pet. With it, I shall conquer this puny town. All shall love me and despair. Kneel at the throne of Cindy! However, the Pokeball bounces right off of its head, much to their confusion. However, another child approaches. Ha 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 ha! You can't catch a Pokemon like that! Let me show you my technique! If you want to catch a Pokemon, first you've got to weaken it, then throw the Pokeball. Again, let me show you my technique. No, instead he sends out his Poliwhirl, which I admit I always assumed to be much bigger than it seems to be here. And also to prove that I'm a weirdo, I always thought the spiral was supposed to be his mouth. And yes, I know what it actually is, it just confuses me is all. Also, where the hell do Poliwhirls get the gloves they seem to wear? Also, we get the title of this chapter. A glimpse of the glow. I sense radiation in our future. Poliwhirl uses Water Gun on the Nidorino, weakening it enough for the kid to throw a Pokeball at it, which does capture it. Geez, people joke about Pokemon just waiting inside their cramped little Pokeballs, but this one actually shows it. But yes, success for our main character, Red, named after what his mother was seeing when her husband was never around to raise him. Huh? What are Pokemon, you ask? Incredibly marketable, it turns out. Strange creatures that live in the forests and lakes. If it's from a desert or a city, screw you, it's a Digimon. Does make me wonder what poor ignorant fool is living in this world and doesn't know about Pokemon. How exactly do you miss the giant fire-breathing dragons and literal ghosts that exist here? Everybody knows me in Pallet Town, and why not? I'm the best Pokemon trainer around. I can buy and sell your ass. Cross me and I'll summon a monster to drown you in your sleep. I don't know how many kinds of Pokemon there are in the world.
Oh, well, it seems silly to me, of course, but then I went to school!
But I know I'm gonna catch 'em all! I was gonna make yet another collect living beings to satisfy my whims joke, but let's be honest, the Pokemon universe is different from ours. Pokemon are thinking creatures with wills of their own, and when some of them can dig underground or fly away, there must be a reason why they stay with trainers. My theory is a socialization thing. Most Pokemon want to be caught at some point and battle to prove their strength. Obviously, there are exceptions to this, since we see Pokemon doing work outside of battles, like assisting in medicine, farming, manual labor, and etc., but since we follow the ones that go into battles alongside trainers, it's usually the fighting kind. And bear in mind, Pokemon can and do disobey trainers both in the games and anime. In the games, the programming is based around which gym badges you have. In other words, showing off that the trainer himself is worthy to be a partner to that Pokemon. After all, why else would it care about some cheap man-made token? In the anime, we see this especially with Ash's Charizard, who needed to relearn to respect Ash before he finally came around. And as for Pokemon being trapped, well, the anime has the answer there again. We see Pokemon being able to leave their Pokeballs at will, in particular Psyduck and Wobbuffet. Hell, even in the games we saw in Yellow, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver, a Pokemon following you around instead of staying in their balls. This has been another edition of Thinking Way Too Hard About a Franchise for Children. Anyway, the kids Red was showing off to ask if he's ever met Professor Oak, since people say he knows a lot about Pokemon. You don't need that, old nut. I'll teach you everything you need to know, says the kid who thinks that Pokemon only exist in forests and lakes. Another weird thing we see, since I guess in these early days they hadn't quite figured out how this worked yet, the top of the Pokeball is transparent, so we can see the Poliwhirl inside of it. Sure, it could just be artistic flair in this panel, but it seems odd to have it here, unless it's more about sunlight hitting it. In any case, Red, distracted by thinking about Professor Oak, bumps right into some black-clad fellows. Watch it, you worm! What the hell is a worm? Don't play dumb with me, there hasn't been a worm Pokemon yet, meaning it's okay to still refer to them like that. Seeing that they have Pokeballs on them, he figures they're trainers and thus wants to try to take them on. However, as we pull back, we see the big R written on their uniforms, revealing themselves to be members of Team Rocket. Because of course your criminal organization should have a big symbol on your chest to indicate your affiliation with said ne'er-do-wells. Say what you will about Jesse and James's disguises sometimes, at least they had disguises. Anyway, Red overhears them saying they're looking for the Phantom Pokémon. By the way, over 700 Pokémon at the time of this recording. None of their Pokédex entries described them as a Phantom Pokémon. Not even any of the ghost types. Weird, isn't it? Red decides to try to find it himself, carrying a bunch of Pokeballs with him, which is a pretty apt visual for how this should work in the games, but there you go. However, what he discovers is that the Phantom Pokémon is actually Mew!
I wonder what Pokemon it is.
And what is Mew facing off against? Gary Mother Lovin' Oak. However, at this early stage in his career, Gary, or rather Blue in this series, is trying to fight it with a Charmander and having no luck. He then quickly recalls Charmander to Red's irritation. What do you think you're doing? You almost had the thing, You screwed up my entire Fantasy Pokemon League rankings! Deciding to take the opportunity, Red sends Poliwhirl out against Mew, and gets smacked back in an instant, Mew just flying off. Blue admits that he realized the vast difference in strength right away during the fight, and thus decided to recall Charmander, rather than risk it anymore. Know your limitations, or you'll only beat yourself. No, I'm pretty sure it was still the opponent that beat him up. Red is stunned that he actually lost, but the battles attract Team Rocket. The lead Team Rocket, recognizing Red, is wondering what the hell happened, but when their men realize that Mew could still be nearby, they run off. And so the first chapter ends with Red approaching Professor Oak's lab, deciding he has a few more things he needs to learn. They say he's a mean old guy, so I always kept away. Nah, he's only mean if you try to ride your bike indoors. Chapter 2 begins with Red entering Professor Oak's lab, which, despite being dark inside, has the door unlocked. Then again, it is based on an RPG. Locks only exist in dungeons. Everyone else's place, go in and loot. The chapter title for this one is Bulbasaur Come Home. All in favor of a Homeward Bound remake with the original 3 Kanto starters? Bulbasaur Come Home.
I wonder what Pokemon it is.
And we soon see that indeed this is not artistic license with the Pokeballs, since Red finds one with Bulbasaur in it and can actually see what it looks like, even inviting Poliwhirl to take a look. So yeah, the Pokemon really do just sit there all day, staring out at a world they cannot interact with. What the hell? Professor Oak enters and, seeing Red holding the Bulbasaur ball, calls him a thief. In the confusion, Red falls backwards onto some controls. No, you idiot! Professor Oak just called a main character in Pokemon an idiot. Maybe all those ROM hacks and fan games are right when they make him swear and stuff. Whatever Red touched causes all the Pokeballs in the lab to open up. Why the hell do you even have a button that would do that? Quick to escape this hellish existence Professor Oak puts them in, the Pokemon all go running or flying off. A Pidgey even pooping on Professor Oak's face for good measure. You teach me and I'll teach you, Pokemon! Sometime later, they've managed to recover most of the escaped Pokemon, but some of them managed to flee the lab altogether. The two head out after them, with Professor Oak on what appears to be a bike for someone much younger than him. And considering Red is able to keep up with him while he travels, it's probably not a very fast bike. The irony of this does not escape me, but, Professor Oak, this isn't the time to use that. They pursue the escaped Pokemon all the way to Viridian City, which, hey, the only other media to depict how short a time it takes to traverse Route 1. But yeah, the last one they need to get is Bulbasaur, which they chase all the way to the abandoned Viridian City gym. Inside, there's even a bust of a short-haired fellow, who I'm sure has no significance whatsoever to events. Professor Oak tries to get the Bulbasaur to come back to him, but it uses Tackle. It's not super effective, since normal-type moves are not super effective against anything, but it does crush Professor Oak's insides, so it is effective at least. However, Red does a much better job earning its trust. Of course you're nervous. It's the first time you've been outside. You were kept separate from the others in the Pokelab, weren't you? I'll bet you never seen another living thing besides the old prof, huh? Well, when you put it like that, it's even more messed up! What the hell, Professor? But yeah, Bulbasaur is pacified, and then a wild Machoke appears.
Wonder Pokemon is.
It is apt that it's a wild Machoke, since I guess its natural environment would be a gym. Red, I think you're gonna need to reevaluate your they only live in forests and lakes theory with this new data. You know, assuming it doesn't break your back and make you humble. Professor Oak is knocked out, but Red manages to evade getting hit thanks to Bulbasaur using Vine Whip on the Machoke. Red realizes that light is streaming in from outside and thus opens a window right on Bulbasaur, allowing it to use Solar Beam on it. And I guess it scores a critical hit or something, since the Solar Beam knocks out Machoke, meaning Bulbasaur is now the heavyweight champion and gets Machoke's wrestling belt. Bulbasaur! You ain't gonna be seeing any more sun, brother, when Bone Button buries you at Lavender Town Arena! Ooh! Ah! Ooh! When Oak recovers, he asks Red how he knew about Bulbasaur's solar beam. Nah, but I figured, you know, plants turn sunlight into energy, and this guy has a plant on its back, so... Of course! Bulbasaur could have just used photosynthesis and not done anything else! Brilliant strategy, Red!
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Oak gets a good laugh at that and later gives Bulbasaur's Pokeball to him, since the starter has taken a liking to him. Red explains the real reason he came to the lab, to learn how to be a better trainer and to ask about the strange Pokemon he saw. I see. But do you know what it takes to be great? Performance-enhancing drugs. Here's an HP up for Bulbasaur. Does it mean knowing a lot of clever tricks? Does it mean having a Poke powerhouse in your arsenal? No. It's about having perfect IV stats after having bred like 4,000 of the things. If you think so, you're wrong. What counts is what's in your heart. Your blood. Pokemon feed off your blood and get more powerful. That connection you had with the Bulbasaur, that feeling from deep within, is the key to becoming a great Pokemon trainer. Although that feeling might also be a heart attack. Better watch out for that. The professor also hands over a Pokedex to him. This is a Pokedex, an encyclopedia of Pokemon. Whenever you meet a Pokemon, enter your data here. By the time you've input all your Pokemon data, you may well have become one of the truly great trainers. Wait, if it's an encyclopedia, why am I entering data into it? Well, because encyclopedia marketed a lot better than glorified journal. And so our manga ends with Red beginning his journey, thinking that he indeed could become one of the greats. Or he could end up sequestered on the top of a mountain, or service the whims of thousands of voices telling him to bump into walls. In any event, this manga is great. Both chapters are short and basic, but they get the point across well. Having a connection to your Pokemon is more important than physical strength, introducing the technology of the world, and creating a likable protagonist in Red who's a bit arrogant while not being annoyingly idiotic about it. It also sets up the long-term story down the line involving Mew and Team Rocket. I think it does well to introduce people to Pokemon, and if anyone was interested in getting into the franchise without necessarily playing a game first, Pokémon Adventures would be a great first step into it. Pokémon has stood the test of time these last 20 years because of its ease of entry, its solid themes of friendship and collecting, and just some really cool mythology and mystique to its world. Whether you started into it in the early days, or even the most recent games, it's just a fun part of both our childhood and our adulthood. Or, in the case of Ash Ketchum, his eternal childhood. Next time, we stick around for more anniversaries of a Japanese franchise, as a Patreon request gets us to look at the first 5 episodes of Kaizoku Sentai Gokaiger.
I'm sitting on my couch reviewing comics, the worst words that you will ever see. It's said that comic books are for geeks.
Gotta love mid-90s technology. The Pokedex is as big as an iPad and 4 times as thick.